guys, it's your girl Matt Cox with Maccouture Crafting with another video for you. This video is about a mini quilt. The reason why I'm doing it is because I realize that when I see in the Facebook groups and everything, people are like, hey, I want to try a quilt. They're like, go to YouTube. And then they send you to these videos like Melanie, is it Melanie Ham? You know, and I do it too. Like, go here. This is your first quilt. But then you have to watch 3 consecutive videos to understand what all goes into a quilt. So this is just a quick, short, down and dirty explanation of how a quilt works. It's, you know, cutting the fabric, sewing the fabric back together, putting the insides in, putting the backing on, putting the binding on, putting the quilt label on, and that's it. Like, it's just quick so that you know what a quilt consists of. I do have videos talking about your beginning quilt tools and things like that, but this is just to give you the gist of making a quilt. And I made this little guy, which is actually going to go on that monitor so that it doesn't have a that reflection. And you'll see it in my future videos. So if you are a beginning quilter or you just want to see how this comes together because it's a little funky, keep watching. All right, bye-bye. Okay, so this is just a really quick mini, just to throw some color behind me and to give everybody the gist of what a quilt looks like when it's being put together. So this is what fabric looks like when it comes off the bolts, and I gave it a quick little run through with my iron, and I'm just cleaning up the edge. People will have you take off the edge so that you get a nice clean cut. And I'm doing the same thing with this black fabric. If you're interested in this pattern, it's very, very simple. These are just 4-inch strips. Actually, they should be 4-inch strips, but we won't get into that. So just a couple of 4-inch strips, and then you sew them together. And you line up your fabric, and sometimes fabric is not the same length, so don't freak out if you're sewing and it doesn't end at the same place. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. They will tell you about pressing seams in a specific direction. I want the seams to hide behind the black fabric, so I put the white fabric on and then I pushed it over the black, and that way the seam is hiding behind the black. And we're just going to freshen up this edge so that we get a nice clean cut. And now I just cut a bunch of 4-inch strips. Nesting seams is another term you'll hear. Seams need to go the opposite direction in order for your quilt to lay as flat as possible. So here I am making sure that my seams go one way and the other seams go the other. That naturally will happen if you press all your seams in the same direction in this particular pattern when you flip it. And now you're going to see sometimes when you sew, see how the seam flipped underneath? I'm going to stop, fix the seam, and then keep sewing. And it's nice and easy, 1/4 inch. I have diagonal seam tape. I have a guard. I'm sewing 1/4 inch pretty consistently. It's actually a little bit less than 1/4 inch. And then remember your seams. It's all about sewing and pressing, sewing and pressing. I am finger pressing here. I'm making my seam lay the direction that I want. And then I'm placing the iron down and I'm lifting the iron up. Placing the iron down, lifting it up. It's not ironing, it's pressing. And now I'm going to do the same thing with the top. And I'm going to check which direction the seam is going down the center. And then I'm going to switch it and make the seam go the other direction so that it nests. You'll see again that I'm going to go for nesting seams. And most patterns will tell you which direction to press the fabric. So now it's nesting. And I've done that with all the sets. And now we're going to grab some fabric off the bolt. I bought a whole bolt of rainbow fabric because I'm a rainbow girl. It won't go wasted. And now I'm just cutting down very small 2-inch strips here. And I am going to use these to do what they call sashing. Sashing is a great way to make something bigger very, very quickly. I'm also cutting some 2 1/4 inch strips, which I'm going to use for my binding. But first, I will show you how I am going to sash. So I'm going to lay out my blocks, and I'm just going to place these in between. Figure out which ones I want to go where and cut them down to size. Nice and easy. And now we're going to sew them to the blocks. Now one side of the block is smooth because it's just the fabric, and the other one has been sewn. So I'm going to try to sew it with the smooth side on the feed dogs. So I put the colorful rainbow side down on the bottom of the sewing machine. And I want those seams to hide behind the colorful, because trying to hide it behind that white block, it might show. So I just push them toward the colorful strips. And then you press it, and now it's nice and pretty. Now for the fun part, or the part that some people love, some people hate, the quilting. I am going to take a chalk pencil, which I have now, and a marker, a friction marker, which pretty much disappears. Some people don't have the best luck with that. But because my blocks are white and black, I need two different pens, because white will show up on the black, but the white is not going to show up on the white. And I'm just making a design. I like straight line quilting. I think it's really pretty, especially when it's done right. This is not the best straight line quilting by a long shot, but I just wanted to test some new fabric. I wanted to make this quick quilt, yada, yada, yada. So forgive me, because when you see it, you're like, it's not the best, but it's cool. You know, straight line quilting is fun. I didn't place these lines anywhere particular, and sometimes people do, and you can draw designs. But quilting is the process of taking the needle through all three layers. So you've got a top, a middle, and a back. And I'm drawing lines to tell the needle, or tell the sewing machine, or tell myself where to sew. So this is going to be the back of my quilt. And this is batting. You can buy this from your big box stores. You can get it online. It comes in like twin, king, queen, and it's a little bit larger, because you need your batting to be just a little bit larger than your top. So I usually make mine about 2 inches on all sides. The backing, if you're giving it to a long armor, sometimes needs to be 4 inches, maybe even 5 inches bigger than the whole thing. When you're doing it at home, I'd say 3 inches all the way around is good. And I taped it down so that it doesn't move. And now I'm taking safety pins, and I'm doing what's called basting. That's what the B is in boy. And you basically sticking all the layers together so it doesn't shift around on you. And we tape down that backing layer so that it stays nice and tight. And now I'm lifting it off, and I'm going to just tuck that under, because I'm going to end up cutting that off anyway. So no sense in me ripping the tape off. Just leave it on there. It's not hurting anything. And now I'm going to trace the lines that I marked with my sewing machine. And I'm using some new thread and all kinds of things. And so now this is quilted. Your quilt will shift, it will shrink, it will do all kinds of things as you've quilted it. After you've quilted it, you're going to cut it down to size, square it up. This is how you make your binding strips. Yes, you can sew them edge to edge the way you would regular fabric, but most people like to join their strips on a bias. So you just crisscross them and sew diagonally, and then when you open them up, it'll be one nice long strip. When you're doing economy binding, you can't afford to lose all of that, so you kind of just sew them edge to edge. So now I'm cutting off leaving a 1/4 inch fabric, and then you fold it in half and hit it with the iron all the way down until you have one long strip that's been folded in half. I'm prepping my quilt label. Your quilt is not finished until it has a label on it. Nobody likes to do that part. I get it, but it's important. So I'm just making sure that I have a 1/4 inch around the whole thing because of the way that I do my labels. I'm going to take it now, and I am going to cut another square that's the exact same size. I'm going to put them right sides. Right sides would be the printed side and the printed side together. And I sew all the way around, all the way around. Then I cut the edge so that I don't have bulk when I'm turning it. And we're just going to flip it inside out so that I have finished edges on my label. I don't want a raw edge on my label. And I know this is a lot, but this is the way I do it. It's like I made a little pillow that I'm not going to stuff. And then when you iron it out, it looks all nice and smooth. And I'm just going to stick it in the corner, leaving about 1/8 of an inch around the sides because I want to catch it. Then I'm going to take some heat and bond. I'm going to cut it down just to a little bit smaller than the actual little pillow puff label thingy. And this label is cool because it's got a song on it and a QR code, which means there's a video capability to it and a song. How cool is that? Now I'm just going to iron this on according to the instructions. And remember, when you're doing your backing, make sure that your backing is facing the opposite direction than your top. I've done it before. We've all done it. You peel the paper off, and now you stick it back down and hit it with the iron for a little bit longer this time. And this product is just called Heat and Bond. And now I can add my binding. Binding is not scary. Don't freak out. The way I do my binding is I just put it on and you just go around the edges. Whatever tutorial you're watching will show you how to do binding way more formal than I am. I stop a 1/4 inch before I get to the end. And then I go up at a diagonal and then back straight down. And that's how you do a corner. Take it up at an angle and then bring it straight down toward you. 45-degree angle away from you to the left. And then straight down. And then I start sewing about a 1/4 inch in. Don't freak out. Your people will show you. This is just to give you the gist of what it's like to make a quilt. It's not super complicated, but you don't know until you know. And I don't think you should have to watch a whole 3-hour series before you find out how a quilt comes together. So I'm going to go all the way around, and then right here I'm going to back up just a little bit when you get to the end. And now you've got 2 ends that are open. So I'm going to cut one and then overlap it. I overlap mine by a 1/4 inch. I mark it, then I cut the strip down, and then I fold them so that they're right sides together. That's why you want to leave them open so that you have some room to work with. And then just sew them together. Now you're going to come back and sew it down because it's loose. Now there are some videos that are going to have you do this on a diagonal. That's just way too much work. And this works just fine. It's not like I'm entering this into a quilt show or anything. And now you're going to fold over. Now I sewed my binding to the back of the quilt and I pulled it to the front. That's my preferred method. Some people will have you sew to the front, pull to the back, hand stitch it, or machine stitch it. This is just my preferred method. So I'm hitting it with an iron. I'm grabbing some glue basted. This is nothing but some washable school glue, honestly. Some good old Elmer's. I fold it over, I hold it for a few seconds, and then I hit it with an iron again. And it just locks it down for me. And I do that all the way around. And then I put it on my sewing machine with this really cool foot. And I sew it down. And that's it. That's a quilt. Then it's a wrap. She's done. Stick a fork in her. Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you later. Bye-bye.